We all have parents. Many of you are parents. So let's get into the mind of parents as they prepare for summer break. I think the worst thing a parent can hear over and over and over again, every day for 2.5 straight months, is, Mom or Dad, when are you going to do this thing? When are you going to, when are you going to give me a snack? When are you going to make lunch? When are you going to take us to this place? When are you going to entertain me, right? When are you going to do all of these things for me? And at a certain age, that's appropriate, right? Children are dependent, and we do have to take care of them. But every good parent is also constantly thinking about, all right, when is my kid old enough to do that for themselves? Making your lunch, for example. How old were you before your parents made you prepare your own lunchbox before you went to school? Right? Instead of, Mom, when are you going to make my lunch? Or, Mom, can you put different cookies in my lunch? Right? It's, no, child, when are you going to make your lunch? When are you going to figure out what you're going to bring to school? That's an important growth point. And it's important because if we don't do that with kids, if we don't give them more and more responsibility, if we don't help them grow, they're going to be very poor adults. I'll tell you, one of the things, I love everything about my mother, but one of the things that I'm most impressed with is just how well she figured out the timeline between middle school, high school, and then eventually off to college. By the time I went to college, she made sure that I was ready for everything. I had a job, I could balance a checkbook, I could do my laundry, I could figure out how to take care of my car. Well, that was probably my dad was more interested in that. But all these things, I was ready to be an adult. The one thing I didn't have was a savings account. Well, I had a savings account, a full savings account, or a source of income. So I still needed some economic stability from my parents in college. But they made sure I could, prepare my own meals and do whatever I needed to do. And that was huge, right? Because they launched me appropriately. They helped me to become an adult. So with this lens, let's approach our first reading. Jesus has walked with his apostles for 3 years. And then he died, he rose from the dead, which kind of explained a lot of the things he was saying right before he died that the apostles didn't understand. Then he walked with them for another 40 days. And now we're at the very, very end of that journey. He's about to ascend into heaven. And as he's on the Mount of Ascension, right before he's about to go up to his Father, the apostles turn to him and they ask, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Now, we don't want to be too harsh with the apostles. This is a very deep messianic expectation. It's part of the Jewish scriptures. It's part of what the Jews expected the Messiah to do. And some commentators on this passage will say, well, the apostles still just didn't get it. They didn't understand that Jesus wasn't going to create a political kingdom. They just didn't understand Jesus' message, even right up to the very end. But other commentators will say, no, the apostles understood, particularly post-resurrection, that the kingdom of Israel was not going to be restored in the way they expected. And so this is a very honest question, which is to say, Lord, there is still this expectation. We know enough now to know that it's not going to be according to our expectations. This restoration is going to look different. But they're still wondering, what is it going to look like? What are you going to do? I mean, you're about to leave, so what are you going to do? Jesus gives them 2 answers. Answer number 1 is, don't worry about it. Functionally, he refers them back to the Father. He says, it is not for you to know the times or seasons that the Father has established by his own authority. Okay, he's basically saying there is a plan, but you don't have to know that plan. Another parental impulse that you have to fight when the kids get older. But it's like, I know what I'm doing, just do what I've asked you to do. It's functionally what he said. But we have the letter to the Hebrews today, and so this is why Jesus is allowed to say it. At the very end it says, let us hold unswaveringly to our confession that gives us hope, for he who made the promise is trustworthy. As flawed human beings, we often have to explain what we're doing, and particularly to older children, it's helpful for them to know why we make the decisions that we make. But God, the Father, is perfect, and he is perfectly trustworthy. And so God is really the only one in the entire world who can say, look, I've got this, just trust me. And we can perfectly trust it. We can say he knows what he's doing. He has a plan. His plan is good and excellent and wonderful. And we really just need to lean into that plan. We do not know the times or the seasons. Jesus is telling his apostles, I cannot really explain to you how the kingdom is going to be restored. I can't fully make that known to you. You just have to trust that my Father has a plan, that he has established it. But it's not fully shutting them down, because the next thing that Jesus says is, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Here Jesus is saying, look, I can't fully explain this to you. And in other places in the gospel, he says, you're going to receive the Holy Spirit who will explain everything to you. So with the Holy Spirit, the apostles begin to understand this better. But I can't fully explain it to you, but do your part. Do what I've instructed you to do. Functionally, preach the gospel of salvation to all nations. Go out and tell people that I have died and risen from the dead, that salvation is available to all people through me. Tell them that. Go and do that with the power of the Holy Spirit. And remember, it's connected to the question of when are you going to restore or how are you going to restore the kingdom? And so he's saying, look, it's going to be restored and you do have a part to play in that, and this is your part. Go do your part, and in so doing you will eventually find and see that the kingdom is restored. My Father has the plan, you are part of that plan, live out your part, and then that question will be answered for you. He can't really answer it directly, he can only answer it experientially. I would say the same is true for us. The Lord can't always explain everything that he's doing. He can't always give us the answer to the question that we're asking, because we will not understand or receive properly that answer. But we have the church, guided by the Holy Spirit, that helps us understand the parts that we play. And that part is to be a good and ardent Christian. Love God and love neighbor. Love God through daily prayer, through Mass attendance, through devotion. Love neighbor through service, specifically and first and foremost to your families, but service to your fellow parishioners, service to your community. If we do those things, then we are going to see the kingdom restored. If we do those things, we are going to see the answer to our questions, our deep questions about our desires and our vocations and where we're supposed to go or what we're supposed to do or how we're supposed to treat our family or what we're supposed to do with this sticky family situation or how I'm supposed to live into this difficult societal problem. Love God, love neighbor, trust that God has a plan, trust that he's going to bring it about. Now let's talk application. In my conversations with the staff and some parishioners recently, we've noticed people have been very, very patient with the partners in the gospel process to date. They have given me the biggest benefit of the doubt possible, and it's a really big change that we're undergoing, and they understand that. People understand that. But we are also seeing, in the last, 3 months or so, tensions on the rise, patience wearing thin. It's hard. We're settling into a new reality, and we don't like that it might be a new reality, and we're rubbing against it. And so the way that's manifested to me, usually, is, all right, Father, what are you going to do about this thing? All right, Father, this is broken. Go fix it. All right, Father, this thing needs to happen. When are you going to make it happen? And reading through the gospel in preparation for this homily, I realized, oh man, that's very similar to the question Jesus has asked. The apostles say, all right, Lord, when are you going to do this thing? We have this expectation. When are you going to do it? And he turns it right back on them. And he says, well, it's going to happen. You do your part. And I find that that's where my heart is today with this homily is, yeah, there is a lot that needs to happen. And yes, there are a lot of struggles with partners in the gospel. But I have to invite you, the parishioners, back into that process with me. It can't be, okay, Father, you have to go fix this thing. I have 2,400 parishioners, I have 7 churches, I have 8 campuses, I have something like 20 buildings and 65 staff. I can't do everything that needs to happen. But that's okay, that's good, because Christianity is a collaborative enterprise. The Lord was collaborative with his apostles. He could snap his fingers and do whatever he wanted to, he's God. But God always chooses to be a co-worker in the vineyard with those that he calls. He always chooses to invite his followers into his mission, rather than do everything directly himself. And that's the way Partners in the Gospel is going to succeed, is if we are partners in the vineyard. I'll quote Pope Leo XIV, who was quoting St. Augustine when Pope Leo was elected. Pope Leo said, "For you I am a pope, but with you I am a Christian." Quoting St. Augustine, who said, "For you I am a bishop, with you I am a Christian." And that's a really important phrase that the hierarchy goes back to often, which is to say, I have a role to play. I've been entrusted through my ordination by the Archbishop to be both a priest and a pastor. As a priest, I stand at the head of our community, and I pray to God on behalf of our people. I bring the power of the sacraments by standing in the place of Christ. As a pastor, I direct our community. I make sure that our money is spent appropriately, our buildings are updated, our staff are well managed. I make sure that we're in communion with the Archbishop and the Pope, legally through archdiocesan policy, the Code of Canon Law, but more importantly, magisterially, by making sure that we always only teach what the Church teaches. I have that role, and it's a role that I gladly accept on behalf of the Church. But I am not the only Christian in our parishes. I am the pastor, but I am not the only Christian. All of us have been given a mission by Jesus Christ. That mission to preach the gospel to all nations, to bring that message of salvation everywhere. And we all share that responsibility equally. As a final point of application, I really do want to highlight again what happened here in Bellingham this weekend with the Marian Music and Arts Festival and then with the Marian consecration. I did nothing for that. And I am happy to say that. Not that I'm happy that I, wasn't, but I'm happy to say I did nothing because it means, and it's a beautiful example of parishioners really taking responsibility for their Christianity, stepping out in faith, and trying to preach the gospel according to their own devotions and desires and charisms. It was a beautiful and incredible expression of faith. In fact, the consecration came about because a parishioner came to me and said, "Father, more people need to be asking Mary for her prayers. More people need to be devoted to Mary." And I said, "I don't disagree with you." And then I was given a testimony about Mary and how Mary had touched this person's life. And I said, "That's a beautiful testimony. You should tell people." And she did. She stepped out in faith, and she did. And 120 people went through a Marian consecration on Saturday. All I did was do what Jesus said. "Father, you should do this thing." And I said, "I think you should do this thing." The apostle went to Jesus, "Lord, when are you going to do this?" And Jesus says, "Well, you are going to do this." Which is not to say I'm ever going to give up my responsibility as pastor, right? I have a role and I will play it. But it is to say, we're in it together. Together we are Christians. Together we take ownership of the faith, take ownership of devotion, take ownership of prayer, take ownership of service. This is a shared mission. And I am happy to share this mission with you. We all need to dedicate ourselves to this mission. As much as it hurts me, you cannot rely on your priest the same way you've relied on them before. We're just less present, we're more stretched, there are fewer of us with different charisms. We will continue to offer the sacraments, and I'm going to be as present as I can. But we can rely on each other as Christians in this mission together. My final point. When Jesus went into heaven, he didn't abandon his apostles. He didn't say, "Go preach the kingdom on your own, using your own efforts." When Jesus ascended into heaven, many theologians will say this allowed him then to be fully present to all Christians equally at all times. Had he decided to maintain kind of this corporeal physical existence, he always has a corporeal existence, he didn't give up his body, but kind of the here and now existence, then if we wanted to talk to Jesus, we'd have to get on a plane and fly to Jerusalem because he'd probably be hanging out there. But because he ascended into heaven, the phrase that theologians will use is he ascended sort of into all time and space. He is now present and able to be present to all of us equally. He didn't send the apostles out on their own. He is with them until the end of the age. In our shared mission of Christianity, our shared ownership of the responsibility of the Christian faith, Jesus is with us. We do this according to His power and His plan, and He will continue to walk with us and guide us and strengthen us. We don't do this alone. We do this as His body, united with our head, to bring salvation to the entire world.